read the first section of On the Deaths of Boys. Nix says, "It might have been redemptive not to have mourned these children as if they were my own. Better learn to shake off fear that suddenly hollows and chills the limbs when I hear bad news that might be mine. To cut the distaff thread of imagination before it is the conversational tapestry, broad rumor of mother love and loss. Once they took our bread. How like you this? The kid who shot heroin on Harris Field and came home to die on his mother's couch. The kid who left his Kingsbridge living room to hang himself in Van Cortlandt Park. The kid whose car missed the hairpin turn at Locust Lane, going curb to rock to tree. The four who left a 12-string guitar in the old Pelham Cemetery by the dock, who, oars in hand, stole a dinghy to go from City Island to Hart Island, who, in the parlous cold of January's Long Island Sound, weltered in the whelming tide as their 9/11 call was bungled. What were the boys thinking?"
Could you maybe speak to your creative process a little bit with that poem and what you had in mind?
3 boys in the middle of the night go to a graveyard on the edge of the water in the Bronx and row across to go to Hart Island. And they drowned in the middle of the trip. It was much more dangerous than they imagined. The mistake they made was they got unlucky because teenagers do all kinds of scary things. And this was something that kept going on as I was thinking about them and mourning these 3 boys, teenage boys. I thought, oh, my own kids who were that age at the time, I didn't know what they did, but I'm sure they did dangerous things. I know I did dangerous things as a teenager. This is what happens. And so I couldn't reconcile the fate that met them with just what happens. People do really bad things sometimes, and they are lucky and they get saved, and people do not so bad things, and fate cuts the thread of their lives.
So yeah, for those of you who haven't read the poem, you have the 3 fates, right, reimagined sort of, and they're like conversating about what perhaps has happened, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so I have their mother sort of organizing their conversation, and then the 3 fates, the one who spins the thread, the one who measures the thread, and the one who cuts the thread are arguing. I'm sort of imagining them, they're arguing about what they need to do, you know, who gets to do what. Hart Island, where these boys were aiming, is a really important place in my imagination. It has an interesting history. It was an early sanitarium for New York City during other epidemics. The first thing that Hart Island was a quarantine island, so it was a medical place. After that, it was a hospital and jail for during the Civil War, for Southern POWs, from the South. And when they died, as most of them did, African-American Union troops were asked to bury them. So these African-American troops who were not necessarily used for the war effort were guarding these Southern troops. And so there's something so awful about that scene where men aren't being able to do what they wanted to do, which is be soldiers, but they're jail keepers, which becomes an irony in the contemporary moment. But meanwhile, they're grave diggers. After that, a African-American businessman wanted to turn it into Coney Island, Solomon Riley, and he was going to have a black Coney Island, and he got all the investments done, and then the city just didn't want to have such a thing because who knows what those people would do. So it got smashed down, and then it became the potter's field for the homeless, people who died without identification.
I didn't know any of this background, so I read it like less politically. I thought of it as more of like a motherly gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear this, it's actually like, it's one of those things that, while very sad, just at face value, when you start to really dig into it, it really billows outward, right? And you see like how really politically charged it is.
Thank you for seeing that. It really, it gets at something that feels really important to me, which is the personal is political and the political is personal. And it's impossible for me as a mother to think about fate and the luck I've had and the lack of luck other people have. And sometimes luck is about privilege, right? Sometimes luck is what you can do to buy your way to luck. And I think about whenever I think personally about my own struggles, I think there are other people struggling too. And so for me, the poem is a mix between those two impulses in me. I really want the world to change. I want the world to have much more love, empathy, grace in it. And but sometimes I can only go at it by thinking about a motherly question. Terrence Hayes goes at it like straight out politics. It's not so easy for me to be straight out political, but I'm always thinking about the politics. Thanks for seeing that.
That's like not a new trend within your poetry, but like that is something that you've been working towards, to write towards that impulse.
I think I have been. I think that's true, that I'm doing this more and more. And I'm sure that has to do with age and my sense as I get older that it's the same old story. It's the same old story. And when I was younger, I thought, well, things will change because good people are trying to change them. And now I feel comfort in reading Virgil, who says things don't change, or Dante, who says things don't change. And yet we need to live a life of justice and grace ourselves. And maybe that's the only thing we can do. So those are the questions I'm playing with. And I think you're right that it's happening more in my newer work.